This is the new moon forecast for, checking my notes over here, October 14th to November 13th. This is for the entire lunar month. I want to do something a little bit different today. Normally, we do this from the point of the Giza pyramids, and we do everything based on Egyptian Standard Time. Because of the annular solar eclipse, we're going to be calculating everything based on UTC, or Coordinated Universal Time. And my location, I have the Royal Observatory in Greenwich. So make sure that when you are doing these calculations for the day and time, you factor that in. Obviously, there's a lot going on in the world, so it should be interesting to say the least. Before we get too far into this though, if you can do me a mega huge favor, like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already. I have zero social media. I'm thinking about creating a Rumble account. I'm not 100% sure how this is gonna work. I tried doing a locals account. I did for like one day and then I just forgot about it. Nevertheless, I have zero social media. So I'd like to get this information out to as many people as possible, as it may help somebody, and it helps the algorithm if, there's likes and whatnot. Okay, by the time this video posts, the eclipse will likely be over with. However, we are going to feel the effects of this solar eclipse until the next solar eclipse, which the next total solar eclipse, if my chicken scratch notes here serve me well, is April 8th of 2024. The next annular solar eclipse, which if you're not sure what the difference is, the total solar eclipse completely blocks out the sun. The annular solar eclipse creates the ring of fire, which is the one that we're having today. The next annular solar eclipse is next October. Again, if I'm reading my notes correctly. The reason why this is important, and why even the new moons are important, or the full moons, or however you want to reckon time, every time we have some sort of celestial event, especially this type of conjunction with the sun and the moon, it creates an energetic echo that lasts throughout the entire time period, which is why we do them month to month. Of course, this is a very, very general forecast. So how these things that we're about to talk about, how they affect you individually, it's going to depend on your natal chart. It's going to depend on where you live, the country you're in, namely your natal chart. But those things also have an influence too. So there's just a lot of factors here. But generally speaking, this is how things are going to be affected the world over. So let's see what this month, and technically some of this year, how these are going to be affecting us. Let's pull some of these out, get rid of this horizon. And if you don't know, this is the literal placement of all of the planets in the constellations. I don't know. Hopefully you can see this. I'm going to move this date and time over here so you can keep track as we go. Sometimes I pull it too far over and you can't see it. This program that I'm using is called Stellarium. You can download it for free at stellarium.org, and you can see everything that I'm talking about. This is sidereal time in the sidereal zodiac. It's just the literal placement of the stars. It has nothing to do with tropical astrology, tropical time, none of those things. If you need help understanding the differences between those two, tropical and sidereal astrology, I will put a link right here for you. It is also important to note that I am not doing Vedic astrology. I am not doing Greek astrology. There's no classical astrology in here at all. This is ancient Mesopotamian astrology from Sumer, Babylon, although it's primarily Sumerian. So there's nothing in here that relates to the classical elements, the Greek planetary rulership system, none of that. If there are any similarities to those things, that is a complete coincidence. So without further ado, let's go find the sun. And as you can see from this point, from the Royal Observatory, the moon is not quite, and I don't know why the moon doesn't show up on my program. I think it's a video card issue. Other people's it does show up. The sun shows up. I don't know if you can see this over here, but you actually have a little image of the sun. For some reason, my moon is just a little blur. I've tried all the settings. I cannot figure it out. So I'm just going to have to use our imaginations. But as you can see, the moon is not quite in front of the sun. That is because the solar eclipse is not actually visible from this location. What we normally do during these lunar forecasts or monthly forecasts is we take a look at the sky as it is at the time of the new moon, which is actually a few hours later. Let's see, 1755. Let's pop this up a few hours and see how much different we're looking at. Okay, so at the exact time of the new moon, it's going to be around, it's actually probably closer to 6 p.m. UTC, not by a few minutes. Again, the eclipse is not visible from this location, which is why you're not seeing it here. Everything happening at this time is going to influence us throughout the entire month. Now, if you are a Virgo ascendant, or you have a lot going on in Virgo, generally you have a very strong Virgo in your chart, this is going to be a really important month for you. As you can see, there is a lot going on in Virgo this month. We have Mars down here, which is arguably getting into some of this Libra energy, although I would still say it is in Virgo. Obviously, Mercury's not really that far from the sun on any given day. So we do have some of this over here. Originally, Virgo was two different constellations known as the Furrow and the Frond. And when you get right down to it, they were basically just versions of Ishtar or Inanna. And her planet, or her literal being, was manifest in the plane of Venus. So this is going to, unfortunately, possibly unfortunately, it really again is going to depend on what your chart looks like. Venus is basically still conjunct with Regulus, which means we're going to get this strong Venus Regulus energy. These are definitely the more assertive warlike traits of Inanna and Ishtar. And so we're going to get some of this aggression now. This same aggression can show up depending on what you do with it. It can be very jovial, very fertile, creative, sexual. We have a lot of good, there's a potential for a lot of joy and laughter and fun and adventure and excitement in here too, but it's going to depend on what you do with this energy. And of course, always what your natal chart looks like. Great news for everyone, generally speaking, this year. And again, we're going to say this applies relatively. I mean, the length, the intensity that this is going to affect us until April of 2024. I mean, it's probably not going to be as noticeable. The monthly fluctuations are going to trump some of these things, but it's going to be an underlying current and it's just going to be there and you want to be aware of it and you want to take advantage of it. The whole point of astrology and predictive astrology is to be able to take advantage of these energies and use them for good instead of evil. This conjunction with Spica is powerful. Spica is the health and wealth constellation. This is thriving here in the material world. Believe it or not, despite all of the chaos, everything that's going on right now, this can be a really good time financially, depending on what you are doing with some of these energies. Again, depending on what your chart looks like too. If you have strong Virgo, you have a lot. If you have some conjunctions with Spica, this is powerful. If you have a financial career, if you are learning, who are studying to do something in the financial sector, this is probably going to benefit you quite a lot. I will take this a step further and say, this is a phenomenal time to actually start learning about how to handle your finances, to take care of your finances, and generally make improvements in the physical world. This also applies to your physical health. This is the time to make those health changes that you have been waiting on. Do not wait for the arbitrary New Year's date of January 1st or whatever new year that you subscribe to other than your birthday. This is a phenomenal time to do that. All of the work that you put in these areas will pay off for you very rapidly. I don't get to say that all the time, but this is what happens when you do take advantage of these astrological energies. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say, of the two things, the health and wealth areas of life, the physical health areas are actually going to be much easier to make positive progress on, namely because of this Mars here. Mars was originally Nergal, or Era in Babylon. He was the god of war, death, and pestilence. I know I say this stuff every time, you guys, but you have to forgive me. Some people have never watched one of these videos. The majority of humanity has not watched one of these videos. I think I get like maybe 100 views or something every month. So again, no social media. So click the like button. That actually helps out. He was not a bad deity. He was actually really great, but he was very sensitive. He got his feelings hurt. When he went to war, it was usually because someone either massaged his ego into doing that, or he got his feelings hurt, or that type of thing. Very, very sensitive, very emotional. He does enjoy a very stable romantic relationship when it's all said and done. He became the consort of the goddess of the underworld, Ereshkigal, and they live happily ever after and have lots of intercourse, which is pertinent when we are looking at relationships and intimacy. Now, on a platonic level or on a non-romantic level in general, this intimacy becomes vulnerability, whether that is physical, financial, mental, but it creates a natural type of sensitivity. In Virgo, this is especially the case. This can make the physical body and the lower energetic bodies very porous, very susceptible to negative and positive influence. If Mars were alone here, I would say that is more likely to be draining and detrimental. You know, you could be more susceptible to stress, could be more susceptible to financial drain, having somebody siphon your financial energy out of here. However, while we still get a lot of the sensitivity, this conjunction with the sun, moon, and basically Mercury in Spica tend to push this into the positive zone. I will tell you though, that Mars does bring additional emotional sensitivity into the mix, especially if you are set up for some of that emotional sensitivity in your chart. So Mars and Leo can do it, Mars and Gemini, Mars conjunction with Antares and Scorpio. There's different places where it can set you back a little bit. Hopefully, this Mercury energy in here is going to balance out some of this emotional stuff with a little bit more logic and reason. I don't know if you watched my video from last month when I was talking about the final week here. We were dealing with this conjunction, which technically was right from the 7th. I mean, we were getting some of this energy, at least from the 2nd, strongest on the 7th and the 8th. And it was going to be getting some of this additional activation here from the moon from the 9th to the 10th. And this was happening with Venus. Remember, Venus is Ishtar, Inanna, goddess of war, as well as love and beauty and fertility and whatnot. The moon is activating these things, or it did activate these things. Anytime this is happening, we are dealing with the potential for war and aggression and some escalation, which we definitely saw just the other day. Again, it's not on the exact date necessarily, but we have to, and hopefully you understand what I'm talking about here. I'm not sure what YouTube bans, what that algorithm bans anymore. So I just don't want to take a chance because I can talk about the political stuff elsewhere, which I'm probably going to do. I have a lot to say about what's going on astrologically, what's going on with all of these different conflicts and the different geopolitical shows, can I use that word? The theater taking place out there. Well, some of it's very real and very dangerous, but I have more I can tell you about that. So I did just create the Rumble account. I'm going to repost this over there. It's still just Sumerian Astrology. It's like the same name. I'll put a link in here too, but I'm probably going to be going into more depth in some of these areas on there. I know nobody will watch it. That's fine. I'll just put it out there in case somebody needs to see it. I'm sure the universe will show them the way. What was I talking about though? Why did I need to go back to this? There was a reason. Something about the emotional something, namely with Regulus, with Venus being over here. Fortunately, Mars is kind of a little bit farther from the sun. These are really strong planets and placements, and this is a lot of activation, but fortunately, Mercury is a little bit more logical. Hopefully will temper some of these emotions. Now, some people, especially those people, Virgo is all ancestors. It's DNA, it's genetics, it's blood relationships. It's our, like I just said, ancestors, descendants, anybody that we have that connection to. Obviously, the emotional stuff in relation to that. You have, say, a genetic connection to some of what's going on out there right now, your emotions are obviously going to be very intense. So hopefully some people can just take a break, take a step back, and if they can, if they have the ability to do that, and try to look at things calmly and logically. I would say this is probably, again, going to bring out the worst in some people. Long story short, if I can sum up all of this right here going on in Virgo this month, and again, this is going to apply to the entire month and on some level to the next so many months until the next solar eclipse. Focus on your physical body. Focus on your health. It's okay to live in the material world sometimes and just work on stuff here. It's perfectly fine. As a matter of fact, take advantage of this. If you're studying for a health or wealth field, fantastic. It's going to go great. Congratulations. As we can see, Jupiter is still right here between Aries and the head of Ketis. This is really powerful, creative energy, can be destructive. If you don't know, this figure right here was originally Tiamat. She was the Babylonian primordial mother goddess. From her, all of creation was made. She is literally the fabric of time and space. But the way that she became the fabric of time and space was her offspring, like the first set of offspring. They revolted, or they tried to usurp her consort, Absu, who was the primordial father. He was slain. She kind of freaks out a little bit, breeds an entirely new race of, or generation of deities, many of them who are very monstrous, and they seek vengeance for their father on behalf of Tiamat and Jupiter, Marduk. Well, some people say it was Jupiter. We'll have this discussion later. If you're a Zecharia Sitchin fan, this will come later. Not later in this video, like a totally different video. It's way outside the scope of this video right here. But anyways, Marduk stretches her out into the firmament and the land and the soil and the stars and the substrate and all of these things. So there is some chaos, even though she is the divine feminine creative force of all existence, and she can at times be very terrifying, not unlike Ma Kali. She is still this creative power. Jupiter itself is very creative. It can be destructive, just like anything creative can also be destructive. But here we get a lot of change. We get a lot of power being asserted in the physical world. Now, on a personal level, this is very good for starting new projects, creative projects, especially if you have some old karmic stuff that you have been working on for many, many lifetimes. This gives you the ability to focus on those things and possibly get some things done. This is really a constellation of initiation. We see some of that overlap with the modern meaning of Aries. Although this was originally Luhunga and it was the hired man. It didn't look like a sheep. It was a little guy and he watched the sheep. Regardless, this is a good time to start things. Just don't expect them all to be finished right now. It's okay. You don't have to finish. Sometimes that's not what you came here to do. You didn't come here to finish things. You just came to initiate. So don't be afraid. Yep, Saturn still right here in Aquarius. Got a bit of retrograde going on. Saturn was originally a second sun. It's also what we look to figure out how you can thrive in the material world. A lot of times there's career indicators in here. Anybody in a technical or artistic field is benefited greatly while Saturn is in Aquarius. Obviously, it's a little bit retrograde right now. Now, a little note on retrogrades, just so you know, nothing is changing with the planet. Absolutely nothing. This is 100% an optical illusion. So energetically, there's not really that much of a difference. But what I can tell you, based on my research, I'm a data person. I think you have to be on some level to be an astrologer. Retrogrades do affect us karmically in that they provide opportunities to either pull out old karmic experiences from the past and use them to our advantage. Or in some cases, you know, if you have been dropping the ball in an area of life for quite some time, it's going to be a reminder of how to make that happen. So when somebody has an issue with retrogrades, such as that group of people out there who believe Mercury retrogrades destroys all of their communication. First of all, I will address this topic in detail later on. Again, it's another one. I can't go into the whole thing right now. A lot of people who think Mercury in retrograde affects them negatively usually have a belief that retrograde Mercury is going to do something to them. Somewhere in there, they accept that programming and they ensure, at least on a subconscious level, that that's happening. People who don't believe Mercury impacts them negatively, surprisingly, don't have any issues with retrograde Mercury or retrograde anything. Now, I'm not saying that nobody has any issues during this time. What I am saying is, again, based on my research, negative retrograde experiences are usually because there's some issue that you are subconsciously setting up for yourself, or karmically, spiritually, however you want to phrase it, that you are bringing it back to the forefront so you can handle it and you can be done with it. Does everybody handle it? No. A lot of times people don't. They just keep letting it come back to bite them later on. Let's say it's Mercury retrograde that gets you. Maybe you find that there are a lot of miscommunications during that time. Maybe what the retrograde's really trying to tell you is that the people that you are having miscommunications with in these situations, maybe these are old karmic relationships. Maybe there's a deeper issue there that needs to be brought to the surface so that you cannot have these same miscommunications every single time. I'm trying to think of an example, like a specific example. And honestly, I don't really have one, namely because outside of personal relationships, these karmic experiences are not easy to replicate. Most people don't have predictable negative experiences around retrograde. They just don't. Like, it's not statistically there. I know that's going to hurt a lot of people's feelings, but it's just not there. And if you don't believe me, start tracking it yourself. What tends to happen is that if you have heard before that retrogrades in astrology are bad and you have a negative experience and you happen to come across, oh, Mercury's in retrograde, you're more likely to associate that with the negativity. But what you're not doing is associating all of those positive experiences you're having the rest of the time with the Mercury retrogrades that are probably also happening. There's usually a planet that's retrograde in the sky. You're not always having things go wrong, but Mercury's retrograde a lot. And people seem to only notice it. They only pay attention to it when things are going haywire, supposedly. But if you were to pay attention on a regular basis, you would notice these things are not having a negative impact on you most of the time, 90% of the time. And again, if you don't believe me, keep an astrology journal. And instead of deciding how these things are going to affect you beforehand, actually see what happens after the fact and then go back and see. And you're going to need a lot of data to make sure that this is really happening. And it wasn't just some offhand, I don't want to say coincidence because I don't really believe in those, but you want to make sure that you can actually attribute it to the retrograde or the whatever was going on. All of the information I'm giving you right now about all of these things, this is not just speculation. All of these assertions have to be tested. What most astrologers do is they kind of just parrot what they've been told, but you can't do that. You have to go out and test this. Just because I'm telling you this does not mean that's the end all be all. You have to test it for yourself too. You have to see how these affect you individually. Some of that individual experience is actually, again, going to be based on a natal chart, but you're not really going to know for sure until you start seeing how these things influence you. I do have an astrological alignment program, which is 5 to 9-ish weeks, depending on how long you want to do it, where we meet daily and we go through and see on a moment-to-moment basis what your experiences were and see where you might be feeling those effects or what might be causing that in the sky based on your individual natal chart. I can put a link to it in the video description if that's something that you're interested in. It is something you can do on your own. But if you like having support and you like having additional information, sometimes it's good to do that with another person. I don't know. I'm sure there's somebody else out there who does it too, but I'm 100% certain that I am the only ancient astrologer who does it. There's actually not a lot of real ancient astrologers out there. I know I'm going off on a tangent. You'll have to forgive me, but I'm already telling you the things. I might as well just tell you the rest of it. Most people who claim to do Babylonian astrology or ancient astrology, they're just doing classical astrology. They have some Mesopotamian flavor to them, some Babylonian flavor. But nobody does real Babylonian astrology as far as I'm aware, namely because Babylonian astrology has a lot of really negative predictions that are outdated and just don't make sense outside of the region or even outside of the Babylonian culture. They just don't make any sense anymore. So if you see somebody doing Babylonian astrology, they're probably just doing classical Greek astrology and again, just throwing in some Babylonian flavor. And that's not what we're doing here. All right, I definitely need to quit rambling. Let's go through some of these days and see how this is going to impact us as we go forward. So to do that, we are going to pay very close attention to the moon. The moon is the fastest moving luminary in the sky, and it is going through and it is triggering major experiences and events, trackable experiences and events for the majority of us. So the moon is going to be perfectly conjunct here with Spica later today. Now the moon is already influencing Mars, but over most of tomorrow, we're going to be getting closer and closer to Mars. As this is happening, that vulnerability that we all have is going to increase. This is going to result in a lot of, again, depending on what's going on in your life and your natal chart, a lot of hurt feelings, possibly some susceptibility, maybe to illness, to stress. In particular, Mars is it can be a stress placement. Usually when the moon is close to Mars like this, it becomes much more cognitive. We start overthinking. This is really going to happen in Virgo anyways. A lot of people do say, even in modern times, that Virgo is very cognitive. That is because of a false and inaccurate association by the Greeks with the planet Mercury and Virgo. But really the reason it's so cognitive is because it's wrapped up in your desire to survive and thrive in the material world. And one of the ways that we do that is by thinking and trying to understand what's going on in the world, our ability to predict potential dangers, stresses. And so it tends to put the survival aspect of your mind on high alert. Now the moon is going to be going into Libra. I mean, it's there on the 16th. Even though you're not seeing Libra in the sky up here in this middle part, this was basically Libra up here. Now, this was originally the clause of the Scorpion. This didn't have anything to do with non-aggression, didn't have to do with not wanting to hurt people's feelings. It did have to do with getting along with your neighbors in the marketplace and your tribe and your community. But again, this is coming from a survival instinct and not from some desire to not hurt anybody's feelings because you just love everybody. Very strong relationship energy in Libra. Yes, absolutely. But again, it's coming from a different place. So if you're an entrepreneur, this is a fantastic time for you. Please take advantage of this. A lot of wealth opportunities this month in particular. So please take advantage. The moon is going to be, I mean, technically it's already in Scorpio, even when it's over here. These were the claws of the Scorpion. I think I just said that, but this is all Scorpio energy. Scorpio is very active, creative. Yes, it can be destructive, but it's mostly creative. Usually when it's destructive, it's out of a need to protect oneself or your family members. A lot of activity, a lot of time for adventure. If you're traveling during this time, fantastic. It's going to be fun. You're going to have a good time, probably especially on the 18th. That's where this energy is going to peak. We do have a beautiful conjunction with Antares. This was the Lysis star. She was known as the lamenting goddess, and she was known to be able to soothe the hearts of angry deities. She was associated with funerals, braziers, fires, and kind of some dark things too, but She was a good deity, she was good. I will say this is a sensitive time. Be prepared for people to come to you, whether that is one-on-one or possibly you can see this through if you have a social media presence, you may see there's a lot of emotion during this time, a lot of vulnerability. This is a very powerful emotional placement with the moon anywhere near Antares, or if you have strong Antares in your chart. What normally ends up happening is people who are in a state of despair on some level will start to seek you out. Now, this is for everybody on a global level. This can trigger some of that despair too. So we have to watch out. Hold on, I'm backing up. Am I backing up? No, I'm not. Oh yeah, I did. I went back one day. Let's see, let's push it forward a little bit. So the 18th could be geopolitically not such a great day overall in general. Just be aware of that. Right, we're going to skip forward. We do have the moon transiting on the 19th right here through this, what is now a partial leg of Ophiuchus, but what was originally one of the snake legs of Nera. He was a deity, but he was a servant of other deities. He also possessed all of the underworld knowledge. Anytime we see these snakes in a chart, we are looking at healing, karma, accessing the secrets of the universe. It's no wonder that this portion of the sky was right here conjunct with the actual center of the galaxy, which the moon will be conjunct with late on the 19th into the 20th. And then the moon will be going into Sagittarius. Expect your intuition to be a little bit higher during this time. If you do any type of ritual, spiritual work, this is fantastic. Expect some really interesting things to happen externally and internally. Okay, so we are going through Sagittarius through the 20th into probably at least the 22nd. We're going to feel a lot of that energy. While the moon is in Sagittarius, this is a fantastic time to do anything related to your ambitions, to your career. Anything with your family is probably suitable too. If you are undergoing any type of medical treatments, the success rate at that will definitely be better too. Anything that you're working on, anything at all, personal, professional, whatever, spiritual, it is benefited while the moon is in Sagittarius. This is the sign of success. If you wonder why people with Sagittarius, sun, moon, ascendant, why they're always chipper and they're always in a good mood, it's because everything's working out for them. You know why? Because Sagittarius is the sign of success. That's why they turned this into a centaur. When this constellation went to Greece, it was because in Greek mythology, Chiron and the centaurs were masters of their crafts. And so they saw, Pablo was already kind of this amalgamation of, he had like a scorpion body, bird legs, a dog head coming out of the back of his neck. I mean, he was this, not really monstrous. He's just associated with animals. But they decided like, no, this is definitely the energy we're seeing over here in the centaur body. So the moon on the 22nd starts to go into Capricorn. Now, Capricorn, despite what you have probably been told, is not cold and domineering. It's not heartless. It's not any of these things. Capricorn is the most nurturing of all of the signs. It is very spiritual. It is very maternal. It is very affectionate, a lot of hands-on. Now, if you're saying, well, I'm a Capricorn and I'm not any of those things, you're probably not actually a Capricorn. You probably are a victim of the erroneous tropical zodiac. Again, I have videos on that if you were interested. So it is like a lot of other people have them too. You could probably check those out. But this goat right here, even in Greek mythology, nursed Zeus. He was hiding from his father because there was a prophecy that he was going to rise up and kill his father, which, by the way, is basically the exact same repeated myth that we talked about with Tiamat in the head of Cetus. I mean, it's the same mythology is being repeated all over the world. There's probably a good reason for that. And again, we're going to talk about this stuff another time, so be sure to subscribe if you haven't already. This side of Capricorn, obviously the goat. This side is the fish. And this fish is related to a little bit of Enki energy in here, which we're going to talk about in a second, and also some of this non-Shay energy, which is going to be related up here into the fish of Pisces. So this side of Capricorn is very much just like the fish of Pisces. We're looking at psychic ability, spirituality, that altruistic desire to give of yourself on a deeper spiritual level. And that's all wrapped up in here because it is also associated with Aquarius. And we have some of that overlapping Aquarius energy over here. We're also going to get some of that innovation, some of that refined artistic ability that we see in Aquarius. So this can be a little bit more, people with strong Aquarius, like actual strong Aquarius, usually end up going into a medical profession or They do things that are very constructive and helpful. So we definitely need some of that energy, hopefully around the same time period, around the 23rd of October, which is getting close to the full moon. Hopefully we're going to be having some of that in the world. Hopefully somebody's going to be standing up and trying to make some peace. That'll be great. The moon starts to go into Aquarius on the 24th, and it's going to be in Aquarius for a little while here, but we're going to count this already as a conjunction with Saturn. Is this the exact time of the conjunction? No, but it doesn't matter if it's the exact time. We're still going to be feeling these energies one way or another. While this is happening, this is more focused on the career, on your physical health, the things in this lifetime that are going to help you thrive and be successful. If you have, again, a career in the technology side of things or in communications, if you do any type of creative work, this is going to be favored during that time. Nothing spooky about Saturn. I think I already mentioned that Saturn was a planet of the sun. So when they talked about, especially in the Babylonian tradition, when they talked about Saturn, they said, we saw the sun in the middle of the night. It was rising at whatever time at night. That's obviously not possible because the sun does not rise at night. They were talking about Saturn. It was also associated with Ninurta, who was an adventurer, a healer. He slayed the Anzu demon. He was basically the precursor to Hercules, and he was associated with Pabilsag, who was the same character that we see over here, this knowledgeable, successful entity wrapped up in Sagittarius. So again, Saturn, success. If we want to see in your chart what you need to do to be successful, where you need to be focused on your career, Saturn's going to tell you those things. It's not evil. It's not bad. There's nothing negative about it. All of the negativity associated with Saturn is primarily based on medieval European superstition. Saturn was the master of time, and he ruled over the golden age of mankind. Literally like the Garden of Eden. Nobody got sick. Nobody died. That was the reign of Saturn. It was wonderful. Saturnalia, which was the festival that eventually became Christmas, was full of merrymaking and joy and families getting together and exchanging presents. And most of our Christmas traditions, I mean, yes, some of those, they come from Europe, but a lot of them are actually based on the Feast of Saturn, because Saturn was amazing. There was none of this negative stuff until, after basically all of the Christian demonic witch burning hysteria nonsense that pervaded medieval Europe. We didn't really get that until then. Okay, so any of the negative stuff you hear about Saturn, you got to get rid of that. That's just old programming. Be done with it. You don't need it anymore. Saturn's placement here in Aquarius, if you didn't know, is part of the reason why we're experiencing such leaps forward in technology right now. I guess that's good. It could be bad, depending how things go. I think eventually we'll end up being good, but we're going to have some bumps in the road in the meantime. Let's not pretend like we're not. All right, so speeding up a little bit, moon goes into the first fish of Pisces. This was originally a swallow or a dove, very much related to peace, traditional, like a lot of the old Mesopotamian stuff carried on to modern day. We just don't realize that that's where it came from. But while the moon is over here, this is a very spiritual time. It's a great time to interact with other people and have good, positive spiritual relationships. This is a karmic time. This is basically like everybody's personal monthly retrograde. It happens every month. We get some of this old karmic stuff starts coming to the forefront. Now, we are still a few days out from the full moon at this point. I'm probably going to forget about it and skip it over here, but this is still a lot of increasing energy. If you do spiritual work during this time, any pujas, rituals, anything like that, definitely benefited. Please meditate during this time. I'm not saying you should wait to meditate until this time. Hopefully by this period of the month, you are already well into a meditation regimen. If you have not started one, today's the day to start. Any day's the day to start. Yes, yesterday was the day to start one, So you just want to keep that going. Now, this does potentially give us the ability to calm down a little, maybe make some peace on a global scale. Even in our personal relationships, this should be a much more peaceful time, much more the desire to be generous and kind. All of that will be accentuated. As we go into the other fish of Pisces, we start getting into that Ketis energy, in which case we are now intensifying that creativity that we talked about before. And this will be especially the case as we get closer to Jupiter, which is going to peak late on the 28th and early into the 29th. This is especially powerful if you are hopefully not dating in the traditional sense, but if you meet somebody during this time, this is likely a fateful experience and somehow will impact you on a karmic level. This is the time, if you are waiting for somebody to come along, like the twin flame experience or the soulmate experience in the relationship, pay attention to who you're running into during this time. Creative projects, what we talked about starting before, you could actually be wrapping some things up during this time. And it's really a day for creativity, adventure, fun. And as this is happening, I didn't skip it this time. So we are right before, so this full moon, right around the exact time I have written down 2024, but I can't remember if I wrote down the UTC time. I think I did. So this is going to be right when we are experiencing the full moon, which, by the way, is the moon becomes full. I wish I didn't have to tell anybody this, but I do. The moon is full every single month because the moon becomes opposite with the sun. It becomes new when there's a conjunction. We get the quarter moons when the sun is squared with the moon. There's nothing inherently negative or positive in any of those. It's just a different type of energetic relationship. Okay, so scrap the medieval associations with aspects, if at all possible, and move forward into a much brighter, better future where these negative associations don't have any power over you. This being the full moon, this is where we're going to get a lot of these intense energies. And I'm going to back up just a little bit because we are going to get an echo here. Right between Venus is still in Leo, so we're still getting a lot of that. And we're also having a conjunction with Mars and Mercury. Not, I mean, it's what you want to do with it, are the world powers going to use this energy for something positive? Probably not. I'm just being honest with you. This could result in some deception with the masses, some issues with communication, probably more censorship. Pay attention to what's going on around the full moon and just see how, and I tell you to look and see, especially in your part of the world, because I know the things affecting, we're all influenced by things going on all over the world all the time, but obviously in your part of the world, this is going to impact you a little bit differently. But what I would say is focus on you during this time. Don't get too hung up in what's going on outside. Okay. Because it could be stressful out there right around the mid-month, lunar month. And that energy will likely last us a couple of weeks. It's not going to be quite as obvious as what happens during the new moon, but want to be prepared for it. It's next here. The moon is going to be conjunct with the Pleiades, which is basically like being conjunct with Mars again on the 30th into the 31st. This can make for, some intensity for sure. Well, I would say to counter any of this, why do I keep doing that? To counter, I'm not used to doing the video with it just playing all the time. The way to counter any of this negativity on a personal level, which it doesn't have to be, but in the event that this becomes very sensitive for you, you definitely want to focus on service, forgiving, just being kind to people. There's a lot of service wrapped up in Taurus, and you want to also exercise some of this kingship energy and divine messenger energy that is also inherent here. Could there be more escalations and bad things happening with this conjunction with the moon and the Pleiades? Yeah, there can, but it doesn't have to be that way. This happens every month. It happens every month. So it just depends on what else is going on. Okay, so we're going to speed up now. There's a lot going on in this portion of the sky. A lot. Let's see if I can sum this up. So up here, we have service, sacrifice in Taurus. We have leadership, youthful leadership over here in Auriga. We have more assertive paternal leadership wrapped up down here in Orion. And then we have emotional sensitivity, empathic ability wrapped up here in Gemini. Gemini has good things and it has bad things. On the good side, Gemini is very loving, emotional, and empathic. On the downside to that, Gemini, these two figures here were associated with Mashlamtai and Lugalira. They were both aspects of Nergal, who was the god of war. But as we know with Mars, as we've been talking about Mars, there's nothing inherently negative about that. It's just very sensitive. So we can come back to some of that sensitivity. Some of that is going to be physical and some of it is going to be emotional. So it really just depends. And this is one of those places in the sky where there's just too much going on, and it's really going to depend on what else is going on in your life in general. Now I can tell you, let's see, what we really want to see is when the moon starts to enter Gemini, what else is going on with Mars and Venus. At this time, Venus is just coming into Virgo and Mars is kind of right in the middle of Libra. I would say we're going to get a nice mix between the physical and emotional aspects of this Gemini energy. So how this is going to impact you, this is one of those ones where I can't really pin it down that much. It's just going to depend on your chart. It's going to depend on your country and what else is kind of going on. But this is going to be affecting you in the way that it will affect you through the 2nd into the 3rd and likely much of the 4th. Then we go into Cancer late on, technically it's going to be early on the 4th, and that again is UTC time. This is introspection, reflection. This is going deep down. Do the meditation during this time. Do any type of spiritual work, do it during this time. This is a good time. I don't want to say to isolate, but definitely take a step back. I mean, there's other things going on too that may not allow for that. Everything going on in Libra may make it a very busy time, especially career-wise. If you work with the public or you have like a lot of clients or something. But otherwise, this is a good time to kind of just focus on yourself, figure yourself out, and get very honest and real with yourself. Oh, go slower than that. The moon is going into Leo on the 6th. We will have this conjunction on the 6th with Regulus. This can be personally a very powerful time for you, time of success on a geopolitical level. Not so great always, but it's not too bad. There's not that much going on over here that's going to make this worse than it otherwise might be, unless, of course, let's see here. No, we're still a little ways from Antares. Okay, so we are probably escaping further escalation of any wars and conflicts during this time. So that's a plus. Now, that said, we are going to be conjunct. I say we, I mean the moon is going to be conjunct here with Venus in the coming days. Is that going to hit us before? Yes, hold on a second. That takes us right into the 9th, into the 10th, probably still getting some of that on the 11th. Is this going to result in additional conflict? Yeah, it's possible, especially with the Mars being conjunct with the sun. It is. I mean, I'm just letting you know. There's no sense in lying to you. Just let you know that that's a possibility. But don't worry about that. You know, again, take advantage of all of this energy of the month, which is related to health and wealth, and make the most of it. So this is going to take us through the 10th. Into likely the 11th is when we're going to get this conjunction with Spica. Yes, I'm eyeballing it. I'm not looking at any type of transit report to try to get the exact dates because on the one hand, that's kind of neurotic. And also it doesn't matter. Yes, these things affect us. They affect us at different times, again, depending on what's going on in your chart. I know I'm beating the dead horse, but I have to beat it because you have to understand, like, this is very general. But also, things affect us beneath the surface. We don't always see when the process starts. A lot of times we just see the end result, and to just look at these things on a moment-to-moment basis instead of just getting the general overview, sometimes we kind of miss the forest for the trees, you know? Right, so we are moving past Spica and we are going into Libra. This will intensify, I would say, as a global tribe, as humanity. This is a very significant time. This is leading us right into the middle of November. And as this happens, I know we already kind of talked about Scorpio and how this is a very social, tribal energy. This is going to bring us to the new moon right around, we're going to say 9 o'clock, but I mean, it's basically the same. And as you can see, we have a very powerful conjunction with Mars and the sun and the moon. This is going to set us up next month for a lot of, I don't know how to say it. This is probably a very dangerous time next month, namely because it's more likely to affect all of us and the emotions are going to be high around the world. Is this going to relate financially? Is this what the emotions are affecting us on a financial level? Is this because of our cultural issues, religious differences, other unseen things that are happening? Yeah, it's probably all of the above. So I don't want you to be concerned about that necessarily. I do think some of this Venus here in Virgo is going to temper some of that. That will likely be our saving grace. Saturn in Aquarius, while it's there, I think that's part of the reasoning. I think I've talked about this before in other videos, but it's probably the reason why we have not all died in a fiery nuclear holocaust, is because we do have some of these other elements out here tempering these things. But next month, yes, it's just, I don't know. I don't know what to tell you. Pray, you know, because you can wake up tomorrow in a completely different timeline. That actually happens. Again, another video, we can talk about that another time, but just know that you are not bound by all of these things. Don't let anybody program you. If you want some advice on how to take advantage of some of these energies, that's one thing, but that does not mean that you are bound to have a certain experience. You are creating your reality. You are the master of your universe. Okay. So use this as a tool or don't use it, but don't let anybody do your thinking for you. Okay. I'm going to go. If you need anything from me, my contact information is in the video description. Please, please, please take very good care of yourself, and I will see you next time.